Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
What are we doing here? Should be all LL Cool J today. Like honestly. Yeah. We'll work on that. So we're getting some blowback. Delaney's okay Tyron Langley inbox. What LL Cool J wears or wore back in his musical heyday wasn't officially a bucket hat. It was a Kangol hat. But isn't it? Wasn't it? Kangol is some snobby British brand, isn't it?
Tomato, same thing. Come on, man.
It was a Kangol bucket hat.
That's a bucket hat. How can you not see that as a bucket hat?
The logo there is the Kangol logo.
I don't care. That's 99% of the people look at that and say bucket hat.
I couldn't afford it. I know that.
That makes two of us.
It's a heavy duty brand.
What?
Thomas knows all about it. All of our guests today brought to you by Quinsam Communications, including Thomas Drance from The Athletic. I tell you, I believe where Thomas is hanging out today, he might need a bucket hat. Thomas Drance joining us now from The Athletic. How are you, sir? Oh, he's got a C's hat.
Look at that.
Nooner at the Nat, Thomas?
Nooner at the Nat, live on location for Canucks Talk, so should be a fun time. And I'm looking forward to seeing my first C's action of the season against Eugene shortly here. Should be a ton of fun.
And nothing like
a bucket
Emerald
hat.
Seas
I could always,
matchup.
Yeah,
go.
I could always use a bucket hat, man. I have no coverage up here. Prevent me from, farming moles the way Dolly farms bad takes.
Yeah.
Are you going to rip the Canadians like you ripped the Canucks?
Why would I rip a single A affiliate that's like a pretty regular short season champ?
Everybody's in love with the Seas. I'm jealous of you, Thomas. Hey, you and Harm Dial combined to write an article in The Athletic on the Canucks' best third-line center options. What would you come up with?
It's going to be really tough because there's just not a lot of talent in this free agent class, and what talent there is as a result of it being relatively limited and because of the premium for centermen, I think is going to be pricey. We sort of identified Pius Suter, Detroit Red Wings, depth center. He's a true third line guy, relatively skilled, but not a high end like game breaker by any means. He's a little bit undersized for a defensive pivot, so that could restrain his cost. But he's shown pretty well when he gets a chance to play with skilled players. Good penalty killer, really solid defensive player, even though the results sort of masked it this past season in Detroit due to some shoddy goaltending behind him. Between him and Teddy Bluger and players of that ilk, we found a couple fits we kind of liked. The question is, will those players actually come in at a price point where it's right for the Canucks? I wouldn't be shocked. Like, Evolving Hockey, we used their contract projections. Suter was sort of our favorite target because he came in at about $2.5 million a year. I won't be shocked if he gets way more than that, right? It's such a tricky market. Centermen are in such demand. And, I really think the free agent route is going to be a tough one for teams looking to upgrade down the middle the way the Canucks are, with center being their clear priority, as they've, elaborated on and explained already this offseason.
Okay, but Thomas, they could do it also through a trade or internally. But is there anyone internally in Abbotsford or Vancouver that can assume that role in your eyes?
No, I don't think so. Honestly, I don't think so. A couple of weeks ago, I ran a comparison with what the final four teams in the conference final, like the NHL's conference finalists, and how did they stack up with the Canucks, and sort of the one area where the Canucks fell just way short. I mean, other than the blue line, was at center ice, right? At center ice, we're looking at a Stanley Cup final series here with Anton Lundell, right? A recent top 15 pick who's come along, who was a world junior hero, produced at an incredible rate in Liga, has been an absolute stud since joining the Florida Panthers, and William Karlsson. I mean, William Karlsson's incredible. He'd be the second best center on Vancouver. He's their third line center in Vegas. Guy's probably a top line caliber player. You look at the other teams, right? Wyatt Johnston was playing first line minutes for the Stars by the end of the playoffs. And then you've got Jordan Staal, like a fringe Selke nominee, one of the sort of hardest two-way checkers in the league. I mean, I liked how Neil Zamon's game came along. I like the defensive awareness. I like the size skating combination. I think he could be a blanket checking center down the line. Aatu Räty for me is probably still Vancouver's top prospect and will remain so until they select 11th overall. There's upside there. He had a really promising season given his age at both the American League and the NHL levels. Skating has a ways to come, but if your goal is to be a playoff team, right? I don't think the Canucks have anything close to an in-house answer, at least not a credible one, for the third line center role.
And they would have, Thomas, they clearly would have announced it by now. This is our guy. Okay, this is it. We're in June, and by the end of this month, midweek, there could be some big changes. They're working the phones, and you know that, Thomas. Garland, Miller, OEL, Besser, Myers. Are they going to be able to get rid of any of these guys in your eyes and create some cap space?
Oh, man. I mean, yes, but I just think it's going to come at a cost. And that cost might not be parting with a good asset. It might just be accepting a lesser return. I'd expect if JT Miller's on the table, he'd have real value. Point per game guy, genuine power play quarterback, versatile. I think he'd be a guy who could return real value. But outside of that, I think if you're finding a way to clear cap space, it's probably going to be in a trade that we look at on day one and say, well, that doesn't look like a win for them, but it could be if they use their cap space intelligently, right? Like, I think that's sort of where this market's going to trend, but there's so much uncertainty, right? I mean, one thing we need to figure out first is what the cap looks like, right? When the NHL sets the upper limit for this upcoming season, and, I remember in 2019 at the draft in Vancouver, like, we still didn't know, right? I was working for the Panthers at the time. We were going to be big players in free agency. We still didn't know on the day of the draft what exactly the final cap figure was going to be. Lots of complaints about that on the draft floor. So, the NHL might postmark a bulletin for Tuesday and you'll receive it Thursday. I mean, that's classic. So, once we have a better sense of what the upper limit actually looks like, whether or not the NHLPA and the NHL can come to terms on an agreement to lift the cap by more than 1 million, we'll have a better sense of just how tricky it's going to be. But without question, this team has, I think, put themselves on the back foot in terms of trying to create avenues to improve this roster. And, I think they're going to probably have to consider some moves that, we certainly don't like from a pure hockey perspective on the day the trade is made. And the success or failure of those moves will depend on what they do with the cap space gained.
Thomas, June 4th, it's the draft combine in Buffalo. It's around the corner. Canucks 11th overall. What's your gut saying? We're getting close. Do they trade, go up? Do they go down in your eyes?
I think they keep it. I think there's, it's going to be really hard to go up. I think it's going to be really hard to get up and trade up for the likes of, whether it's a Leo Carlsson or a David Reinbacher type. And those would sort of be the two names that I'd be eyeing from that perspective. I mean, I think that's going to cost a massive premium and a massive premium that will likely exceed the appetite of this organization, not to mention actually exceed the amount of holdings, like the amount of assets that it would take. They might not have them short of throwing in a 2024 first or something outrageous like that. So I think it's going to be too hard to go up into the top 10. And, I think there's an awareness that they do need to get more talent, more high-end talent into the lineup. And I think 11's, a pretty good spot to do so. The two things that are interesting about picking 11 is there's a pretty clear top 10. Like as this process is unfolding, it feels like there's a solidifying top 10. And if you're holding 11, there's a chance that, a Ryan Leonard or a Zach Benson or a Matvei Michkov might fall to 11, and then you get a really, really good player but sitting where you're at. Now, where the trade down possibility gets interesting to me, gentlemen, is I'm still convinced that the Canucks really do want a center or defenseman here, right? Like they really, I think I'm not saying there's not a winger that would be too good for them to pass up, but for all the best player available sayings, like, make no mistake, defenseman center, that's going to be this organization's focus. That's what I'm hearing anyway. So is there a possibility that they end up trading down because of the value of 11 based on how the draft board unfolds. I could see that, but more than anything, I think they're most likely to pick at 11, and I think they're most likely to pick the best center or the best defenseman, ideally a right-handed defenseman who's available when their pick comes up.
Thomas, in terms of being available, does Michkov drop the way Podkolzin did back in the day because of that?
I mean, he could drop. He could drop in a totally different way because the Russian factor, which sort of lay dormant, is back. Right, that there's going to be real risk in drafting Russian players, and I think that's why. I mean, there's that 6'4", 200+ pound puck mover, Dmitry Simashev, right? If you gave that guy a Canadian passport and his name was like Jack Cross, right? We'd be talking top 5, right? I mean, that's the sort of skill set we're talking about, and yet, middle of the first round would be a reasonable expectation. So I do think the Russian factors back. Michkov's situation is particularly complicated given the circumstances around him, the length of his contract, at least 3 years away. I don't think he gets to 11. I just think that, like, when you look at Washington and their willingness to swing, with home run cuts for Russian-born players, given the ace in the hole they have at navigating the political landscape over there in Alexander Ovechkin. And when you look at Detroit, too, and I wouldn't count out Detroit here. Detroit, we know, has a mess of draft picks. They've had some really bad lottery luck, right? Like, the thing that Detroit sort of doesn't have in this building effort, or this Iser plan, as it were, is that really high-end player. I mean, if you can take a shot at one, even if his arrival is delayed at 9th overall, doesn't that make sense? Like, those are the two organizations that I know the industry is eyeing and wondering if they'll be the teams to stop Michkov's slide. But certainly I think there's a chance that he gets as low as 11. I just wouldn't expect it. I'd be pretty surprised if he gets by both Washington and Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit with 11 draft picks, thanks in large part to the Canucks, or in small part to the Canucks this year. And then they've got 4 first-rounders over the next 2 years. First time we've
nice
had
to have friends.
Oh, it is. First time we've had you on, Thomas, since Arturs Silovs was named tournament MVP at the Worlds. Where does he go from here?
I mean, hopefully to playing 50 games next season, and I don't care what level he plays them at. I just want to see him get reps. One thing about Arturs Silovs that's worth keeping in mind here, gentlemen, is what we're looking at a player who's played 53 professional games in North America in his career. We're looking at a player who, went 18 months while getting like 5 professional games in during the pandemic. We're looking at a player who was drafted in 2019. He's still extremely young in goaltending terms. And we're looking at a player who, for as much as we like what we've seen, and we really like what we've seen, he's got a 908 career save percentage in the American League and a 905 career save percentage in 3 NHL starts. That's not lighting the world on fire. Like, let's be like, I think we have to accept, like, this is a player with talent, and he's flashed the ability to dominate in net. And those are extraordinary signs, particularly for a young man who was selected 6th overall in 2019. There's a lot of talent here. A lot of the players that skate with him in the summer praise his work ethic, his seriousness, his unflappability. I think we saw that too when he came up to Vancouver. So I'm not trying to pour cold water on this because I'm not in on Silovs. But I would beseech everybody to, like, look around at what it takes for a top prospect to really break into the league. Like, look at what Dustin Wolf has done for the Calgary Wranglers, but also down in Stockton prior to that. We're talking about a guy with like consecutive 930 save percentage seasons as a workhorse American League starter. And like next year is going to be sort of his first time in, right? I think I don't think you have to overcook a goalie. I'm not a big like overripe guy. I still think that, Ken Holland probably said that once to one reporter 15 years ago, and everyone's repeated it as gospel since. I think young goalies can play in the league, but for a player like Silovs, I do think it makes sense to really focus on getting him game reps. And, if it takes some time to do that, that's fine. Like, let him dominate as an American League starter for at least a year before you've got him, wearing a ball cap on the bench on a regular basis in the NHL and playing once or twice every 2 weeks. That to me doesn't make sense as a development path. I don't think you even give him the opportunity really to like win the job. I think if he wins the job, then what he's really won is the ability to be the first guy up in the event that you need someone to be a fill-in starter and carry the load. And in the meantime, prep him for that by treating him like a starter in terms of his usage down in Abbotsford with the occasional call up when both Abbotsford and Vancouver are home. That to me, it's a no-brainer. That's how this club should approach it, with his development in mind and game reps as the foremost priority.
If you're a Bee Gees fan, I've got a poster you might like. I'll send it your way. Inside joke. Thanks for this, Thomas. I appreciate it. Enjoy the ball game. Looks like you're ready.
Thanks. And, I'm not a Bee Gees fan. I'm definitely a fan of the other thing.
Oh, we're having trouble with the BJ word today.
I have company.
But I certainly sound like the lead singer. Woo!
Yeah. Especially when the other thing, never mind. Okay.
Nailed it.
Hey, Thomas, like I said, I have company, you have company. I made the exact same mistake about half an hour ago, and our inbox is not letting me forget about it.
Yeah.
What a show today is.
Just say Bee Gees, quit giving the initials out.
Okay, thanks.
Truly, to make a mistake like that right at the end of my hit, that just sucks.
No. Easy, buddy. Don't get us in trouble. Thanks, Thomas. Appreciate it.
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
I like that.